And I asked them, the first question I said is, what is product to you here? What does it mean? Because you have an app, you have a website, I can order things, but I also get ingredients and it comes packaged and there's a box and there's things in there with instructions. But I also have something that I make out of those. So what is the product to you? And to them, the product was the end point, the meal, the thing that has been made, the thing that the person is going to cook and eat was the product to them.
Welcome to Talking Roadmaps, where I used to say we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of road mapping, but this is season 2, and season 2 we're mixing it up. This is episode 1. Today I'm joined by Chris Compston, and we're going to dive into product operations. Just a secret, that's all what season 2 is all going to be about. So Chris, can you introduce yourself for us?
Thanks, Phil. Very excited to be here on the first product operations podcast I'm having with you folks. So, my name's Chris Compston. I'm a consultant and advisor focusing on, surprise, surprise, product ops and product operations within organizations. I work with clients to introduce effective product operations as a function, essentially to maximize the performance and impact of their organization, their teams, and their people.
If you're enjoying the channel, subscribe, hit the bell, and give us a like. Okay, I love that. So it's kind of product management for product management.
In a way, however, I would broaden it out slightly. I don't think ProductOps focuses purely on product management. I think they focus on product development as a whole. And obviously that encounters many, many different functions, many different aspects and many different levels of product.
Okay, I've got to unpack that before I even go anywhere else. Because to me, product management sits next to product development as a peer, but you talked about as if it's part of product development.
Differentiating here and saying this is a terminology thing, right? Product development being the development of products, the building of products, the deciding what we're going to build, understanding what customers may value, what kind of business impact we're kind of aiming for. So the development of products rather than the function of development or the action of development.
Yeah, and I guess, and here's my philosophy, product management is about more than developing. It's like often the right choice might be to change the marketing or do something, or change the pricing or the business model. And that to me is a part of product management, which kind of, hence why to me it sits as a peer to development of a product. But it's interesting. It's often a conversation I have with people about that subtle difference of the I guess the broader church versus the deeper church.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's doing product, right? Like, what is doing product? What is defining what is it we're going to build? I mean, you need to understand the customers, you need to understand the business, you need to be strategically aligned in the development of products. If you're developing products, it could be services that you're building. You could be thinking more around what you're going to be removing from the product. You could be doing nothing but changing something on the back end that has a customer impact. Terminology. I think this is like really important actually. And I talk about this quite a lot with clients at conferences. How we use certain words is really, really important. And the way that we define them, the terminology that we use. I talk about this a lot when I talk about high performing teams. Well, how do you define that? What is high performance in your world? What is effective? What is efficient? All these different words that we use. Even when it comes to things like, what do you call an objective? What do you call a goal? What does strategy mean to you? All these words have to be clearly defined within an organization because they all operate differently. And we can't take our previous biases and previous experiences and apply them to new organizations, which is where the life of a consultant can be quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with someone on LinkedIn the other day where they were saying they were struggling to recruit product managers because they were finding that product managers with 4 or 5 years experience hadn't owned a product end to end. And they, in their company, a product manager owned a product. It was like 1 PM, 1 product. And I said, well, it's not typically how you'd set up a product organization today. But what do you mean by a product? Because where do you draw the line? Like to Facebook, search is a product and it has multiple people looking after it. To us as a user, it's just a feature.
I was speaking to, this was a couple of years ago now, actually during an interview, speaking to one of the food delivery service, the packaged ingredients being delivered to your house for you to cook. And I asked them, the first question I said is, what is product to you here? What does it mean? Because you have an app, you have a website, I can order things, but I also get ingredients, and it comes packaged, and there's a box, and there's things in there with instructions. But I also have something that I make out of those. So what is the product to you? And to them, the product was the end point, the meal, the thing that has been made, the thing that the person is going to cook and eat, was the product to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the title product kind of does us a disservice sometimes. It's a historical footnote almost. That, I mean, if you go back even farther, it's brand manager as well. And really, we're there to, I mean, I like to use the phrase create customer and business value at scale. And the at scale is the important part, because if you're not doing it at scale, you're definitely not applying that product mindset. But if you're not creating customer and business value, then what the heck are you doing? But okay, I think it's time for us to dive into product ops a little bit. So tell us, Chris, in your opinion, why do companies need product ops?
So I think firstly, what we should probably do is distinguish the difference between product operations, which is all lowercase, it's a thing that we do, and product ops, which is capitalized. It's a function, it's a team, it's a group of people, it's an individual that's been hired to do operational work. I don't think it's the case that organizations need product operations. They're already doing it. I was even thinking about this earlier today. Even a startup that has a couple of co-founders, they're still doing operational work. The moment that they say, this is how we're going to communicate together, this is how we're going to make decisions, these are the tools that we might use to build our new product or service or whatever it is they're looking to do, they're already doing operational work. They're already having those questions. The question is more, when is the point where we decide that we need to hire product ops as a function, as an individual, as a team? At like what point do we make that decision? That question comes up a lot in the product ops community, usually from people that are either new to product operations or interested in actually building a function and what it means for them in their organization. We actually get quite a lot of product managers coming to the community and saying, I'm doing a lot of operational work. How might I found a product ops function? And it's not a question of scale. I don't think we can say, when you get to 10 product teams, when you get to 20 product teams, you need X number of products ops people, product ops managers. For me, an organization needs product ops when their people, the cross-functional group of people that are developing products, building services, or doing everything that a good product team should be doing, they're spending more time thinking about how they're working and sharing how they're working with the organization than focused on delivering customer value, understanding and then delivering on customer value that achieves business impact. If they're spending more time on the former, thinking about how they work, and less time on the latter, what they're actually doing and trying to achieve it, that's the tipping point where you go, maybe we need someone in product operations to help us out here.
I mean, because I reflect from my own career, like product ops was always there. It was usually a part-time job for someone in the product organization or for several people in the product organization. We didn't have a name for it. It was just something that got done. I remember from the process perspective, that was a hat that I wore within my last organization. From a analytics and data side of things, one of my team definitely was the person wearing that hat, and kind of bringing that to the broader team of how we worked, the ways of working and so on. And so it was interesting as I saw the title and the function emerge. It's like, yeah, that's who was doing it, and a bit of me as the head of. Okay, so I can kind of see how that was part of what we were doing, and I didn't know what to call it back then.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we say that, and I hear that quite a lot. It's like, I kind of thought that was part of my role, or isn't that what product leadership should be doing? I think it was, I'm going to age myself quite a lot now, but I think it was about 12 or 13 years ago, I was a UX designer, and probably about 5 years before that, there were no UX designers. There was nobody with a specific role of focusing on designing the user experience of the products, the services, the websites, the e-commerce that we were building back then. There was no one doing that. It was a group of people that were doing it. It was the developers mostly, and maybe someone that was more in an product ownership type role. They were the ones drawing the wireframes, deciding what the interactions would be and what the experience might be as you go through the flow of buying a product online. And then we found that we needed specific roles to do that because maybe the products and services we were building weren't quite as effective as we hoped they would be. So we need someone that has some real key skills and capabilities to do that work. That's now formed into what we now really call product designers, who are doing a bunch of different things. You would never build a product nowadays without a product designer. Obviously, if you're building, if you're more in startup world, you're probably all mucking in together to do it. That's fine. But there's definitely a tipping point where you go, our product's not really that great anymore. We've maybe found a bit of product market fit, but the experience isn't great. The interaction is not great. It looks a bit crappy. Let's hire a designer. And from that point on, you never really get rid of a designer. And that's like a major part of the product team nowadays and a product organization. And I think we're just here in product operations now where and there's difference between UK and US, would I say probably Europe and US product operations is a little bit more established out there. But maybe in like 5, 6, 10 years, we'll see that product operations in certain types of organizations is more of a dedicated role that is an essential role, like user experience design was finding 10, 15 years ago. Purely because of what I said, is we want our teams to be focused on customer value and business impact, not on the operational side, not fully on the operational side.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I remember the first time I worked with a UX designer and had the epiphany of the value they were creating, probably around 2012, something like that. And this was at a startup event. And we called them the lesser spotted designers because they were the least frequent to turn up at events. So when you were forming a team, you grabbed one quickly. And Simon was awesome, and he exposed me to so many kind of different tools and techniques that kind of opened a lot of my eyes. And so that power there was definitely there. And I mean, this is one of my favorite books. I tried to look behind on my bookshelf. There's one called User Interface Design for Engineers. And this is probably from the early noughties. And it talks about, for example, how Excel won the war against Lotus 1-2-3, not because it was really good at financial modeling, which Lotus 1-2-3 was streets ahead, but because it allowed people to keep lists and therefore became the thing that is now the greatest shadow IT product on the planet. But it's, the kind of the crappy user interfaces you used to get because just the engineers were doing it.
I mean, the title of that book is interesting as well, because what do you want a product team to care about? I actually do want everyone to be caring about the experience and the interface and the interaction of the product. I want the product manager and engineers to care about customers and the way they experience the product. Absolutely. Do I want them to be solely focused on doing that? Well, no, because we need engineers to build the thing and we need the product manager to do the work they're supposed to do. And it's the same on the operational side. I do want the product teams to care about operations. They're going to have to if they want to be an effective, efficient team, like we hope they will become high performing. But do I want them to spend the majority of their time thinking about it? No, not really. Now, in an organization, you may have product leaders that are going to be focused on that, and that's absolutely fine. If they think that 50, 60% of their time should be focused on the structure of the organization, how they're strategically aligned, are we sure they have all the right data points they need, and how can I streamline that? That's absolutely fine. They're doing operational work. But there will become a tipping point where VP of product shouldn't really be doing that, and you probably have to think about hiring someone.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if I reflect on other functions, like we've had sales ops for a while, we've had design ops for a while, in fact. I remember IT ops back in the day. That was the people you handed over the operation of the product to. Now, obviously, the DevOps movement has changed that a little bit as well. But kind of having that operational team or group of operational people, and maybe how they're organized varies a little bit, where they're integrated or separated, can be definitely super empowering for people focusing on where they create the most value. Okay, so that's fair. How is ProductOps set up differently across different organizations?
It's a really good question, and again, it's a question that we get a lot in the community of how is your team structured? What pillars might you have? Now, I was actually speaking to the director of ProductOps at Vistaprint yesterday because their model is slightly different. And going back to your point around design ops, they actually have design and product ops under the same structure, management structure. So it's quite interesting. And I speak to a lot of product ops practitioners in leadership levels to ask them this question. And nearly every organization is set up differently. Why is that? Because every single product organization is indeed different. The product is different. The customers are different. The way their leadership is different. I mean, anytime you throw a lot of humans into a room or into a remote room to work together, they're going to have their different ideas on how the organization is structured and how they work. Therefore, the operations of those organizations are quite different. In Melissa Perry and Denise Teller's product operations book, they have outlined what they think are the pillars of product operations, which is internal data, external data, and like tools, practices, systems, etc. Processes that are in there as well. And I've seen a lot of ProductOps teams set up in that way. But I do think to fit the need of a changing, evolving product org, ProductOps also has to be ready to be flexible. So you can come in with like a loose concept of how you may structure things and the work you may focus on. But very quickly, that may have to be changed. You may have to be quite adaptable in that space. I do think the best product operations practitioners and leaders are quite comfortable knowing that they can focus on whatever the org needs, and they've got good experience to do that, but being comfortable with the ambiguity of, well, actually, we may not know until we get in there what we should be focusing on.
So there's a number of questions I want to unpack there. The sorts of people who are doing product operations, what background do you think they should have?
Again, it's a really interesting question, and it comes up quite a lot. Do I need to have been a product manager to be in product operations? My answer to that is usually no, you don't. The first part of that answer is and like at the top of this call, I don't think we focus on product managers as a customer. I think we focus on the product organization as a customer. And that involves many different teams, different peoples, different backgrounds, capabilities, experiences, job titles. So I don't think you need to have been a product manager, but I do think you need to have some really solid experience being in and around product development, the world of building products. I think that experience is what sets good and still learning product operations practitioners apart. I've never been a product manager. I don't actually think I'd be particularly good at being a product manager. I enjoy the operational side of it. But I've had like 15 years of being in and around and in teams playing roles where we were building products, understanding what customers wanted or needed or valued, what they might pay for, what kind of business impact we're aiming for. So I know what good looks like. And I think that's a real differentiator between people that are new to product operations and ones that are more experienced, being able to identify what good looks like and then amplify that across the organization. It's a lot harder than it sounds.
It's interesting because I've generally taken the perspective of essentially I'd love to have my principal PMs be the product ops team because they then bring the best practice to everybody else. But I hear the point about that broader church of product people that they're supporting and driving. And it's interesting you said that some of your clients have kind of merged it with design ops. One of my clients has merged it with the agile delivery leads. For example, they've put it under that church and seems to be a nice fit there as well in their organization.
Yeah, I mean, just to your point around principal product managers, I do think they should be sharing best practice. Absolutely. I think they should be almost the go-to. How are we going to improve our product organization from a product management perspective? I think they're good go-to people. They can be coaches, certainly internal coaches within there. I think in those organizations that have that level and have a product operations function, they should be best friends. Because the principals are a little bit closer to the actual development of products and working with teams, working with people, they should be a really good source of feedback and insight into where we might improve. I think then the product ops team is a little bit more accountable for like spreading that knowledge, amplifying those good and best practices across teams, particularly if you have, an org that has like 50, 60 product teams. Okay, we may have like a good 20 principal product managers, but actually standardizing some of that best practice and amplifying it shouldn't be on them. They should be able to identify and then share it.
I love that. So it's the identify and share, but the product ops team can take it and run with it and and roll it out essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's about taking like more novel, interesting, experimental practices, experimenting them within teams. And then if those practices seem like they're adding value, whether it's to make us more effective or to make us more efficient, we then start to move them into a place of, okay, this is now becoming like more standardized best practice. And eventually it becomes, this is how this organization does product. This is the foundational practices that we have. So it's been started by the principal product managers and other levels, by the way, not just the principals, other levels of leadership, other members of teams. And then moving it down into, well, this is just how we do product here. Now, it's going to take a couple of years to kind of find that like balance. But when you've got product operations people in the org, that'll happen in a much more smoother, more streamlined and possibly quicker way, because it's easier for them to have a much broader picture of the org and where practices like that may be experimented with, or we can actually start to make it foundational.
Let's go to zoom to the other end of the spectrum then. There are some organizations that hire super junior people to be the product operations managers with little experience to what you talked about of what good looks like. Sometimes almost put in as, dare I say, assistant PMs or assistants to the PM, if I use my office quote. Any thoughts on that pattern?
Yeah, a couple of things. Product operations is really here to enable product, right? And product being the broad product, not product management. The development of products, however you want to kind of phrase that. Product operations is here to enable that. Now, if someone's been able to identify the way to enable our product teams to do their best work is by having someone with them on the ground, maybe, as I was mentioning before on the product operations book and its pillars, maybe focused on purely customer data. And that's the only thing that person's going to do. It's very tactical. It can be, there's tools that help you to do it. It's quite process driven, but that person can sit there and do that work and then enable the product team, essentially increasing the quality of their decision making, right? We now understand customers a little better. We now understand what they're doing a little bit more. Now we can build better products for them. If they're brought in to do very specific things like that, they can be successful. If they're brought in as a product ops manager to look at the broader product organization, to be able to identify improvements, optimizations, areas where teams may be struggling, that person is going to struggle quite a lot and they probably won't be successful. I gave a talk at Product at Heart in Hamburg last year called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it was about a team of one product ops manager. I rarely see it work, and they have to have such specific focus at the beginning that people start to question why they even need product ops, because they were only doing one thing. But they're only one person, and I think any team of one, it's really hard to like have that impact. So if you're bringing in more junior people with less experience, get them into very specific things and say that's what you think product ops is. The function then maybe grow, and you maybe get different levels and different levels of experience coming in.
So let's unpack that further as well. You said a team of one struggles. How big should a product ops team be then?
This is a great and easy answer because it completely depends. As I said before, like because every product org is quite different, the needs are going to be quite different. And I think this is where myself as a consultant in product ops, in the product ops space, the way that I can engage with a client is by coming in and quite quickly identifying the biggest challenges that they're faced with. Now, what tends to happen with product ops is that someone probably in leadership, so there's two different routes actually, someone probably in leadership going, I don't think our teams are effective or efficient as I'd like them to be. Let's hire someone in to figure that out. The other way is there's a bunch of product managers are doing a lot of operational work, and it kind of comes from the bottom up, and they've started to identify themselves that doing this operational work helps the teams to be a bit more effective and a bit more efficient. But either of those approaches, if you can bring someone in that can very quickly go, look, these are things you're probably going to be most struggling with. Let's bring in a team to focus on those. Your team size can be quite different. Like I said, the director I was speaking to the other day, they have 60 product teams. They have 8 product ops managers, but they're almost like internal consultants. They're in there identifying potential opportunities for optimization, for improvement. They're looking very high level. They're looking at governance, they're looking at planning cadences and working with leadership. So you don't need one per team, But then I've heard of other organizations that have like less product teams and more product ops managers, because they're very embedded in the teams, very focused on purely enabling that one or maybe two teams max. So it can depend.
Yeah, I mean, I always took the philosophy, or have taken the philosophy, that they should almost be trying to make themselves redundant. It's like they're helping improve and change the organization in such a way that they're not needed to do the operational stuff because they systemize, etc. as they go. Ultimately, there's always another problem to solve. So they never actually make themselves redundant.
Yeah, it's interesting because I understand that concept from a consulting perspective. I understand that concept slightly from what we used to call Scrum Masters and then turned into Agile coaches, in that actually if your team is now operating quite effectively, quite efficiently under an Agile framework model of some kind, then maybe you do kind of make yourself redundant. I think Product Ops is slightly different in that, yes, there will always be more challenges to find. However, it's more about scale. So as the organization scales, the practices, the processes, the procedures that you had in place when you had 5 product teams could be wildly different to when you have 15, 20, 25. Now your governance, now your planning, now the way that you bring that data and insight and the way you communicate with the rest of the org, the way that you document and have standards around that are all going to start to shake a little bit as that scaling happens. And I think one of the huge benefits of having like Product Ops in place is those scary moments where you think, oh, actually we're scaling so fast things are going to break. Product Ops are there to kind of support that scaling through and make sure that things are still happening and teams can still be effective.
Now, if we had to, I'm going to bring us back to a little bit of fundamentals then. So what are the key responsibilities of Product Ops? And I know you're going to say it depends, and I love it because that's the title of the book I'm writing, but kind of, if you put it in some almost like the core and the things that some places do almost.
I mean, for me, I always fall back to Product Ops should be in an organization to maximize the performance and impact of that organization. So how can we do that? Well, we can focus in so many different places. Like, again, every organization is quite different. There's 3 kind of key tropes that I think I talk to my clients about. We need to make sure that all the teams and the organization as a whole is strategically aligned around the needs of the business. That can be done in various different ways. We need to make sure that we have empowered teams, that we're customer-centered, that we have a good, not the vision and the strategy and the objectives itself. Product Ops is not going to come in and write that for you, but structure it and to communicate it across the business so everyone fully understands it and is aligned is definitely an area of focus. To make sure that where the organization is value-driven, so make sure that our teams understand where their product fits in the market against its competitors, how it makes money, that we're data informed, and do we have the right pipelines of both customer, external and internal data coming in, and that we have experimental practices and that we can iterate on those practices. And finally, to be outcome focused. So are we actually able to create objectives that are outcome focused? Are we able to actually measure on those outcomes, understand when we've achieved or not quite achieved our outcomes and iterate on them? Do we have good customer feedback loops? And do we have an iterative and continuous learning practices? All of those areas can certainly be focused on by product operations. And the reason I say all of those, because it keeps it high level, it keeps it strategic. I'm not going to sit here, and I know we're on the Talking Roadmaps podcast, but I'm not going to sit here and say product operations will come in and introduce a road mapping tool for you and make sure you communicate across the business. Now, if we go back to my statement of maximizing performance and impact, does having a road mapping tool that is accessible and is clear and is value driven and is communicable across the organization to business partners and stakeholders and customers maybe, is that going to help performance? Actually, yes, because now as a product team, I don't have to spend extra time trying to describe and detail and communicate with various different people. Is it going to increase impact? You would hope possibly yes, because now we know how we're more aligned around some of the objectives that we have and the things we're building towards it. But having a tool around road mapping and the practices around it, it fits within being strategically aligned, value-driven, and outcome-focused.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like some overlap with the CALMS model that comes out of the DevOps space. Not going to dive into it, but I think it's something I'm going to have to kind of do some overlaying and think about myself afterwards. So, okay, we've got these. You said there was the 2 routes of it coming in. We're going to establish, or we think we want to establish a product ops function. How do we justify it?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, if your product teams, if your product leadership are spending more time focused on the operational side. So how do we do product here? How are we structured? How do we share? How do we communicate? How do we document things? How do we talk and collaborate together? If you're spending more time focused on that than focused on delivering customer value and business impact, at that point, it's a tipping point of going, well, actually, let's bring in some people to do that. Ultimately, product operations, like the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim is, and this is why I don't really subscribe to product operations has a customer, and that customer is product managers. For me, in product operations, the customer is the customer, the end customer. I'm trying to do everything within an organization to make it effective, efficient, to ensure it's high performing, to drive that customer value, because I know that that's what's going to drive business impact. So I think the need for me is quite easy to justify when you start to take away a lot of the focus on the teams on that operational work, so they can focus on the customer more. The expectation is that we actually see an increase in customer value being generated and business impact, whether that's revenue or whatever else we're aiming for. If that increases, product operations is doing a good job, because we're helping the product organization to do that. We're enabling them to do that.
Well, you're not going to get me disagreeing there, because I consider product management and product work as a whole to be all about that creation of value, and and I tend to preach a broader church than just the development side, as you heard at the top end. I started product management with a P&L. Like, that was how my life started. And caring about that commercial side is just a core part of product work to me. Caring about go-to-market, all the rest of it is fundamentally still part of product work.
Yeah, and I think there's, with a lot of the teams that I see that are incredibly highly capable at product development, delivering products, getting things out there, and maybe even measuring the impact and the outcome of that work, there's often a lack of accountability for business impact, accountability for revenue, accountability for profit and loss, and the understanding of finance and how the business generates money to keep us all gainfully employed, to hopefully scale the organization. That is often lacking, and I don't think ProductOps is accountable for ensuring that teams understand that. But again, we can kind of play our part. If as a ProductOps consultant or new team that we identify that actually some of our teams are lacking that, then we can bring in external trainers, we can bring in product leadership to explain it more. We can again, because we're quite, well, ProductOps people are generally problem solvers. That's another problem that we can solve through operations.
There's potentially a natural tension, because product managers are naturally problem solvers as well. So I wonder if we find ourselves fighting over the same terrain sometimes. But the value of who should focus on it is the interesting thing, I guess.
We should just be friends. Like, let's problem solve together.
So let's switch gear a little bit. What do you consider to be best practice for product operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've touched on this a little bit already through what I've been saying, but I think generally keeping it high level, right? You are not going to help to evolve a product organization if you're right down in the weeds right from the get-go. And I think the best ProductOps practitioners are the ones that can understand, again, as I was mentioning before, like, how is the org strategically aligned, value-driven, outcome-focused? When you start talking about those levels, you start to understand actually working with product leadership, and in some cases, business leadership as well, to structure an organization, a product organization with empowered teams that is focused on outcomes and really cares about the customer. Keeping it at that high level is going to have way more success than, for example, joining and going, right, well, our documentation isn't standardized, let's start there. You're going to have such minimal impact that questions will start to be asked of why we even need product operations in the first place.
So what's the biggest mistake that people make?
There's a couple of things, and I think it all gears towards being in the weeds, being in the detail too much. The biggest kind of mistakes that I see, very often the starting point for a ProductOps team that had maybe just been newly founded, or is maybe even being built from within the organization, because that often happens as well, is over detailing the product development lifecycle and spending a long time to draw every single box on whichever workshopping tool you like. every single box, every single connection, every single role, every single output, input. It can be incredibly cathartic, particularly for a newly joining ProductOps team. And it can be incredibly good for onboarding. Don't get me wrong. If you have identified over the course of, say, 12 months, we're going to hire another 20 to 30 product managers, it's probably a good thing to just have a good understanding of the product development lifecycle and all the different connecting points and all the key people and processes. That's not too bad, but over detailing it and getting really into the weeds is something I see happening quite often. It's an artifact that is very, very rarely looked at ever again, because product development, as we all should know, is messy. The key building blocks are always the same. They're always the same, but all the little intricate parts, they don't always need to be detailed. I think that's a bad starting point. The second thing I would say is observing teams so closely and hoping that you're going to be able to identify gaps or optimizations and improvements within a specific team. The majority of the time, those teams already know it, they're already struggling, and they're already blocked by it. So getting in and just observing, sitting on calls, you're never going to unearth the real larger strategic challenges that the org is facing. You're only going to solve the problems for that one team. That's why I say it always needs to be kept high level. If you want empowered product teams, it starts with product leadership. It doesn't start with the people in the teams.
Now, obviously, we are on a channel called Talking Roadmap, so I would just like to explore how are ProductOps involved with road mapping?
Yeah, as we just mentioned, right, if we go back to, do roadmaps help us to maximize performance and impact? They do. And there's various reasons why that is the case. And a lot of them is about accessibility for the rest of the organization to understand what we're doing. Roadmaps at different levels. Of course, we don't want our business stakeholders to really be in the technical details and the steps we're going through. But those high level value driven roadmaps where they know, okay, these are the things that are going to land on a certain kind of time frame. It creates a bit of a barrier between the product teams and business. And I mean barrier in like a positive way. There's no need to have that conversation because there's a road mapping tool and we're using it and we have a strong roadmap. You don't need to contact us. I think the role of product operations here is certainly on the operational side. So like, what tool might we be using? How do we templatize these roadmaps so much that our product teams don't have to think every time about how they create and share? How do we document, communicate? What rituals might we have to collaborate on the building of the roadmap, to share at certain points, and to get it out and get business stakeholders involved in it? Like, what are the rituals, the processes, the documentation that we have around that? I think that's where ProductOps can add value. Of course, the management of the tool or tools themselves, like for onboarding, for access purposes, a ProductOps team can certainly pick that up if it's a larger team. Again, if you're a team of one or two people, you should be thinking more strategically than tool management. That should be left to your IT department. As that group grows, as the organization grows, you may bring the tool into the management of the ProductOps team.
It's interesting as you described all those kind of like interfaces and stakeholders and forums and things. I'm thinking, I do a lot of those sorts of conversations with clients in setting up their product organizations. So I'm having ProductOps conversations.
Absolutely. And there may be that there's someone in the org that they've identified and gone, right, you're a lead product manager, so you're going to have to set up the tool to do all this stuff. Now, the setup of the tool is one thing, right? The building of the roadmap is a completely separate thing that the product people, the cross-functional group should be doing. Certainly in ProductOps, I'm not going to be doing that. But the setup of the tool is one thing. The maintenance of that tool and the evolution of and getting the best out of that tool is a completely different thing. If all we wanted from a road mapping tool was simply to show the now, next, later blocks, then we can just do that, as you referred to before, on Excel. We actually don't need anything for it. However, the road mapping tools that are out there now, the product org tools that are out there, they're incredibly powerful. And actually, if you want to get the most out of them, because they're also not cheap, no tools are cheap, you need people in there monitoring, maintaining, and making sure we're getting the most out of that. Do you really want your lead product manager to be doing 80% of their week is focused on managing a tool? Probably not.
Heck, I don't want them to spending 80% of the time on their roadmap. It's like, to me, they want them doing the product work, and the roadmap happens to be a result of that work.
And I think that's an important point, right? Because we do want those people to be focused on, again, customer value, business impact. The roadmap is a tool within itself to enable that to happen. We'd have to be really careful, because I've definitely seen product operations people becoming accountable for the roadmap. accountable for dependency mapping, accountable for making sure deadlines are hit. That is not the role of product operations. That is for the product teams themselves. And if they have delivery people in that organization, they should be helping as well.
So, okay, coming towards the top of the session, Chris, if you had to distill your philosophy on product operations into 1 or 2 sentences, what would it be?
Again, for me, product operations is all about maximizing the performance and impact of product organizations, doing that by increasing the quality of decision-making across the product development lifecycle, and trying to build the highest performing teams we can with helping them to be effective and efficient in delivering customer value and business impact.
And is there anything I should have asked you about product operations that I haven't?
I think one of the interesting things, particularly in the B2B, there is a difference between B2B and B2C product operations, and B2B being a more encapsulating phrase for like SaaS, enterprise, internal products versus ones that are directly into consumers' hands. There is a difference in approach and structure and mentality, and therefore the people that might be hired into those roles. There is a difference there. We can definitely go into some of that. Maybe that's another episode.
Maybe what's the headlines of the difference?
The headlines is on the B2B side, you just need a lot more structured processes in place. And the focus of the ProductOps team is to ensure like the interfaces between the people that are building, developing the products and the business are in place. And that interface is really strong. They're in place, it's streamlined, and the communication is really good back and forth, but with a number of guardrails in place that the product org isn't inundated with requests from business stakeholders. I was actually having a really interesting conversation again with someone in the B2B space that the like regional business units, again, the ones that are they are not building the product, but they're almost like proxy product managers because they're so close to the product. They're using it day in, day out. They're trying to sell it to their customers, to their clients. They really feel like they're part of the product world as well. So now how do we actually enable them to feel accountable for the development of that product? That's a very, very specific B2B challenge that ProductOps can certainly help with. On the B2C side, it's much more around the practices of product. So like product discovery, product development, research, how we communicate internally. Those are more the focus on B2C.
So Chris, it's been a pleasure having you on the call on the session today. Always like to give people a chance at the end just to give their pitch of how people can get hold of you, how you can help them.
Yeah, great. I mean, as I said, I'm a consultant and I'm an advisor focused on product operations. You can find out everything about what I do at chriscompston.com. Nice and simple. I do also have my own newsletter, chriscompston.substack.com, which you can obviously sign up to, where I share tools, frameworks, concepts, theories around maximizing the performance and impact of product organizations through product operations.
It's been great having you on the channel today, Chris. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.